Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, presided over by Cardinal Fernandez, has published this week an important document, Dignitas Infin, dedicated to expose, denounce, condemn, it should be said, those behaviors that seriously violate human dignity. And it is a good thing that the document is about human dignity and not about human rights that we are seeing that are so easily manipulated. Of course, the document is not perfect, and it could certainly have been done differently and more elaborated on some points. But it is really an important document, which is to be welcomed and appreciated. And in order to understand what I am saying, I believe that we must look at 3 points. First, what the document says. One cannot evaluate it if one does not know what it says. Second, who has been bothered, or at least who has been most bothered by this document. And third, who has written this document and what importance it has for the future. Let's go to the first point. What does Dignitas Infin say? I have selected some ideas. They are phrases, most of the things I am going to read. Verbatim from the document. The Church proclaims the equal dignity of human rights, regardless of their condition in life or their quality of life. This proclamation is based on a triple conviction, which in the light of the Christian faith, confers an immeasurable value on human dignity and reinforces its intrinsic demands. It is right to say immeasurable value, not infinite value as could be inferred from the title, because God alone is infinite. Immeasurable is already very much. Without the corrective help of religion, the text adds, reason could also fall prey to distortions, as when it's manipulated by ideologies or applied in a partial way to the detriment of the full consideration of the human dignity of the human person. After all, such abuse of human rights or reason was what caused the slave trade in the first place, and many other social evils, in particular, the spread of the totalitarian ideologies of the 20th century. There is a natural law imprinted in our DNA, like our fingerprint imprinted in human nature, a natural moral law, but it is easily manipulated and we are suffering it not only now, the document speaks of. For example, the justification of slavery or those totalitarian ideologies which it does not mention, but which are in the 20th century, Nazism and communism. And that is why revelation is important, because it is the revelation that does not allow itself to be bribed, because it is the untouchable message of God. It is fundamental to be very clear about this for a Catholic, even for the German bishops. It must be recognized. The text goes on to say that it is opposed to human dignity, whatever is against life, and it cites some cases, homicide of any kind, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, and even deliberate suicide. It is also contrary to our dignity whatever violates the integrity of human person, such as mutilations, moral or physical torture, systematic attempt to dominate the minds of others, and finally, whatever offends human dignity, such as subhuman living conditions, arbitrary detentions, exportations, slavery, prostitution, trafficking in human and young people, or degradation and degrading working conditions that reduce the worker to the rank of a mere instrument of profit, without respect for the freedom and responsibility of the human person. This is not an exhaustive analysis, nor does the document claim to be, but it would be too detailed. But I believe that the essential things have been said here. But there is still more. The document denounces some serious violations of that human dignity that are particularly up to date: poverty, war, the working condition of migrants, human trafficking, sexual abuse, violence against women, abortion, surrogate wombs. Those who have been hurt by this phrase have already cited and cried out to heaven, but I don't know whether to heaven or to hell. The document condemns surrogacy, parental wombs. It goes on to say euthanasia and assisted suicide, the discarding of people with disabilities, and here comes perhaps what has caused the most controversy, which has most angered the alleged or self-proclaimed friends of the Pope. Gender ideology, sex change, the persecution suffered in some countries by homosexuals, and Dignita violence. It clearly condemns without any justification surrogacy, wombs for rent, as well as gender ideology. I am quoting only a few sentences because each of these sentences then developed what it does so, and also condemns sex change. The document also tackles the question of the elaboration of new human rights that are not such. Literal quotation. Sometimes the concept of the human dignity is also abused to justify an arbitrary multiplication of new rights, many of which are often contrary to those originally defined, and not frequently put in contradiction with the fundamental right to life. We must remember that he is talking obviously among other things, but obviously he is talking about abortion, euthanasia, which he has already cited as very serious violations of human dignity. But this is what he is doing at a time when a country like France has just included abortion as a human right in its constitution, and the European Parliament 2 days after the publication of this document. This very week, therefore, has approved by a majority, not unanimously, but by, not unanimously, but by a majority and a large majority, the recommendation that all the states of European Union include abortion as a right in their constitutions. Of course, it is not going to be put into practice, and it is not going to be put into practice because unanimity would be necessary, and it is not going to happen. But it is very significant, and that is why this reference made in the document is important. Although it does not mention it as perhaps it should be mentioned it. This reference to these new supposed human rights that contradict the previous right, and that also contradict the fundamental right, which is the right to life. The document is very hard on abortion and also on gender ideology, of which it says that gender ideology presents and pretends to deny the greatest possible difference between living beings, the sexual difference. This constitutive reference is not only the greatest imaginable, but also the most beautiful and the most powerful. It achieves in the male-female couple the most admirable reciprocity, and is therefore the source of that miracle that never ceases to amaze us, which is the arrival of new human beings into the world. Not all things have upset, infuriated, I would even dare to say, those who present themselves as the Pope's friends. They present themselves as the Pope's friends well, and of course they are allowed to take smiling pictures with them, which gives reason to believe that what they say is true. But it is clear that with this document there is no doubt that beyond gestures of welcoming hugs and smiles, beyond those gestures there is a profound discrepancy of opinions. For example, the reaction of that group, New Way Ministries Association, which supposedly, I repeat, has been supported by the Pope because the nun who founded it has been welcomed in the Vatican, and the condemnation given by Pope Benedict XVI has been lifted, and because after that president of the association said that Pope Francis was absolutely in agreement with the practice of homosexuality, well, after this document against gender ideology, against sex change, they have made this statement. The New Vatican document, Dignitas Infinitas, fails terribly. These are the words of the Pope's supposed friends. It fails terribly in offering transgender and non-binary people not infinite by limited human dignity. While it lays out a wonderful justification for why every human being, regardless of his or her status in life, should be respected, honored, and loved, it fails to apply this principle to gender-diverse people. The Vatican's arguments and conclusions about gender identity and gender transitions indicate that the authors have not consulted the advances in the biological, psychological, and social sciences on gender. Worse, New Way continue. It shows that the author did not listen carefully to the lived experience of people who have often discovered, after painful and torturous journeys, that God has naturally created them with gender identity beyond the social expectations normally based on physical appearance. They are really angry, and it is a disqualification so total to the document. They don't mess with other things, but as far as they are concerned. But there's more. They further accuse the Vatican of, quote unquote, supporting and propagating ideas that leads to actual physical harm to transgender, non-binary, and other LGBTQ plus people. The document explicitly says that it condemns any kind of violence against people who are homosexual or even practice their homosexuality. It should be remembered that there are countries in Africa, but also Muslim countries, where this is punishable, even with imprisonment or sometimes even death. The document is very clear in the condemnation, but then it seems very little, and they even accuse the Vatican of giving arguments for this violence to continue. According to this organization, they are harmed by the same violence that this document condemns in economic, psychological, spiritual, social, and most tragically physical ways, which causes serious harm, often leading to death. This hunger is so great that they accuse the Vatican of being a collaborator in the economic, psychological, spiritual, social, and most tragically, physical repression against homosexuals, those with homosexual tendencies, or who practice homosexuality. This is more than an anger, it is an accusation and a declared rapture. We must also remember, as I have said before, that the known benign Gremic, condemned by Benedict XVI for his writings and heterodox teaching, was rehabilitated by Pope Francis as a gesture of reconciliation, of goodwill, and now that organization founded by her, not presided over by her at this time, is the one making these harsh accusations against the Vatican, Cardinal Fernandez, and even the Pope. But it has not only been them in the United States. In Italy, the reaction has been very similar. Even in Spain, there has been the reaction of a Benedictine nun, Sister Teresa Forcades, a woman who also presents herself as a very close friend to Pope Francis. There is no lack of photographs that confirm this. And this woman, this nun, has made a public document, a critical note against Dignitas Infin. This is what it literally says. For a cruel theology, she speaks of the one she develops. She has a book dedicated to this, the way in which Dignitas Infin approaches the ideology of gender, abortion, surrogacy, euthanasia, and suicide in all satisfactory. For Sister Teresa, not only gender ideology or sex change is not correct, as the Vatican says, but she includes in her reasons for dissatisfaction. These are the words she uses: abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide. Also for her, the Vatican condemned these things as very serious violations of human dignity, is unsatisfactory, and asks why it is unsatisfactory. Because this document, this condemnation is doctrinary and little nuanced. Finally, Sister Teresa continues, the paragraph on sex change seems to me to be a scandal that should never be published. They are not angry, they are furious. They were not the only ones. Also, the German Bishops' Conference has made it known that they do not like the document at all. But it is certainly cannot be said that the German bishops are friends. At this moment, they are among the disappointed friends, because they have been ceased to be friends of the Pope. At least in some aspects, even if officially they still present themselves as such, and say officially that they do not want the rupture. Third point, why this document is important. Who has written it? Is a document of the Theological Ratzinger of the Pontiff Pope John Paul II, of the Pontiff Pope Benedict XVI. No, it is a document of Cardinal Fernandez, not even of Cardinal Adaria, for example, or Cardinal Muller, who has been prefect of the doctrine of faith with Pope Francis. It is a document by Cardinal Fernandez, whose closeness to the Pope is very known. A document signed by Cardinal Fernandez, endorsed by the Pope explicitly. And what does this mean? That it is tomorrow. If tomorrow someone wants to modify some of these things and say abortion, euthanasia, sex change, surrogate motherhood, gender ideology, any of these things that the document condemns, these things are more or less acceptable. He is going to find himself going not against Pope John Paul II, not against Benedict, but against Francis. His friends, I have always said that with friends like this, there is no need for enemies. His so-called friends say that he is the Pope. They are the ones who say it, that he is the Pope who wants to apply the Second Vatican Council with a hermeneutica of rupture, that he is the Pope of the new church, that he is the Pope who is willing to change sexual morality of the church and other things as well. That is what his so-called friend says. Those who are very angry, well, if you go against some of the things that this document condemns, that is to say, in favor of these things, you are going against Pope Francis. It is true that it can be said, well, dogma evolves, and therefore, if a year or 2 years ago it was said that this was wrong, today we are smarter than 2 years ago, and we say that it is right. It is true that it can be said, it has already been said, it is the issue of the blessing of homosexual or heterosexual couples who do not live together in marriage. It has already been said also, but to repeat the same argument twice is going to be very difficult, because it will clearly show the official installation, not unofficial but official, of relativism in the church. There will be absolutely nothing from the moment that the church says that she can be taken seriously, because what today is bad, tomorrow, that trick or that excuse of the evolution of dogma can be said to be good. Who is going to take something seriously, something that not even those who defend it are willing to maintain a defense over time? Saint Vincent de Lawrence, who spoke of the evolution of dogma, is often quoted, and this French saint is very interesting. An interesting saint also because he was accused of semi-Pelagianism. Saint Vincent de Lawrence, who lived in the 5th century, not in the 20th century, says the document can also and must indeed evolve. And he establishes two categories, the category of progress and the category of change in the dogma. And progress, which is what he defends, is when dogma evolves without betraying, without denying what came before. Change is when dogma evolves, contradicting what came before. Change is unacceptable, progress is acceptable. At the time of St. Vincent de Lawrence, or until relatively recently, one could not speak of gender ideology because it did not exist, of surrogate wombs because they did not exist either, or in vitro fertilization because it did not exist, of genetic manipulation because it does not exist. Dogma evolves by progressing when it does not betray what came before. Dogma evolves by betraying, by changing when the previous is changed. To change this is not going to be so. If someone pretends it is so that way, an unacceptable and an acceptable evolution of the dogma is going to be a change and to betray, and a betrayal to the document. I insist, it's not a perfect document, and some have already taken out some points that could have been improved according to their opinion. It is a very acceptable document. It is a document to be welcomed, and it is a document to be appreciated. Until next week, God's willing.